Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings, friends. It's another amazing day here in the green state of California. This is your entrepreneurial host, Tyler Hemp with HempAware Radio. We've got another exciting, insightful, and informative discussion for you today with Patrick Goggin, Hemp Advocate, California Legal Counsel for organizations and folks such as Vote Hemp, Dr. Bronner's, or David Bronner with Dr. Bronner's, just to name a couple. And he's here as a leading-edge hemp-entrepreneur, lawyer. He's on the cutting edge of knowledge and information as it relates to hemp and cannabis, especially on the legal front. We're going to talk about what bills are currently moving through the House and who are a few of the political or legal hemp figures currently out there spreading awareness about industrial hemp and doing their best to change laws and change consciousness on the cannabis movement. You can discover more about Patrick and his supportive work to raise awareness about and defend the rights and benefits for the people that are in the cannabis world. PatrickDGoggin.com. Patrick's legal firm has over 30 years combined qualifications in litigation experience, trained mediation, expert translation, and environmental law certifications. It's an honor and a privilege to have such a cool guy on today's show. Patrick, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here, Tyler.
Right on. So to kind of give our listeners an update of who you are and where you've come from, what initially inspired you to get into law and cannabis, or the cannabis industry, and kind of melding those two worlds together?
Well, I went to undergrad at UC Santa Barbara back in the late 80s, and I was a major in history, and a class that really changed my life was the history of wilderness and civilization, and it led to my rise as an environmentalist in the late 80s, early 90s. And out of that, I tried to decide what I wanted to do. How could I assert environmental advocacy, and I decided to go to law school. It seemed that my voice would be most influential if I took that route, and I ended up going to and participating in the environmental law program at Lewis and Clark College in Portland in the mid-90s. And once I got out, I went into practice with my father and was doing a lot of other stuff, general civil litigation and criminal defense, but I was able to encourage him to take on some environmental cases, and we took on a Clean Water Act case against two water districts for repeatedly discharging raw sewage down in Southern California. And that resulted in some limited success. We did cause them to implement over $1 million in upgrades to their systems, but it left me thinking long and hard about what part of environmental law that I wanted to specialize in and focus on, and ultimately I chose industrial hemp. In the 80s and early 90s, I was made aware of The Emperor Wears No Clothes, Jack Herer's book on the history of industrial hemp, and that somewhat inspired me, as well as Woody Harrelson's actions in the mid-90s in Kentucky, and I decided to throw my hat in on industrial hemp at that time.
Right on. Well, we're so thankful that you are fulfilling the role that you are. It sounds like you've got a history of legal family, your father following kind of in his footsteps, and it's something you're passionate about and you're well-spoken, so we appreciate you fulfilling that role. And now I'm curious, so after reading Jack Herer's book and learning about the history of hemp, you decided, okay, this is something environmental, this is something that I can put my skills into. Why do you feel that cannabis and hemp should be legalized on a federal as well as across the states? Why should cannabis and hemp become legal?
Well, specifically regarding industrial hemp, it can play an important role in what I refer to as the state sustainability pie. As we struggle to transition from an economy that is based on expansion, growth, and exploitation of natural resources, industrial hemp seems like a great one solution to the many solutions that we need to our current environmental paradigm and the rise of global climate change. And industrial hemp can play a role in that. Principally as an agricultural crop, we need to increase from where we're at in the United States from a research paradigm to a full commercialization. But when we're talking about cannabis in general, the most important thing to me is it's a social justice issue. We need to stop incarcerating people for a possession of a plant that is far less harmful for humans and society than alcohol. So principally from that philosophical perspective, I'm a big advocate for normalizing all things related to cannabis.
Very good. So as far as the government institutions that ultimately will regulate the growth and the manufacture and the distribution of industrial hemp-related products, I'm sure, do you feel that there would be different institutions or governmental agencies that would kind of regulate and govern industrial hemp or cannabis? Would they be the same institutions or different institutions? How do you see that regulation coming about?
Well, regarding industrial hemp, it's an agricultural issue. It's an agricultural domain, and it ought to be regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, perhaps with some involvement of the Food and Drug Administration. And then in California, where I'm located, and we've worked hard to pass a bill here, we've got the California Department of Food and Ag that has jurisdiction over it. With respect to other realms of cannabis, there will be jurisdiction and regulations adopted by the departments of ag as well. You'll include departments of commerce and the Board of Equalization, and various economic and financial agencies, as well as the agricultural agencies, in addition to the Department of Public Health.
Mm-hmm. So it will take an organized sort of regulatory board or several different organizations that will both work on the industrial side as well as the medical side, it sounds like. Yeah,
that's correct. In California, the legislature finally passed statewide regulations, and there are, I believe, 6 different agencies that will play some role in the regulatory process of medical cannabis.
Interesting. So with that said, let's talk about a few of the bills or pieces of legislature that are currently going through the House today. What can you talk about as far as first on a state level and then on a federal level?
Well, the state level... Oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you?
No, go ahead. I was just saying what bills or acts are currently going through.
Yeah. So in California, we spent almost a decade in getting our Industrial Hemp Farming Act passed. It was led and championed by Senator Mark Leno, who was initially in the Assembly when it was originally introduced in 2005. We faced 3 vetoes over the years, and finally in 2013 we were able to get a signature from Governor Brown, and what we had to do is we had to condition it on federal authorization in order to get his signature. He was concerned, as well as Governor Schwarzenegger prior to him, about the federal-state conflict, and they didn't want to put, even though we had a solution and we were had the case designed to avoid federal preemption, they were concerned about the federal preemption issues, and so we chose to circumvent that issue by conditioning it on federal authorization. So that passed at the state level, and then subsequently in early 2014, Congress finally passed the Farm Bill, And the current Farm Bill had attached to it something we refer to as the Hemp Amendment. It's Section 7606, and it authorizes states that have passed industrial hemp legislation to conduct research projects at the university and at the Department of Agricultural level. And the states that have really been leading the way on that front are Kentucky and Colorado. We do have a project in the works in California and hope to have field trials in 2016 at Cal Poly Pomona. We also have three bills in Congress presently, companion bills in the Senate and the House for the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. One in the House, it's H.R. 525, and in the Senate, it's Senate Bill 134, and that is essentially removing industrial hemp from the definition of marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act, defining it as less than 0.3% THC, and removing it out of jurisdiction from the DEA into ideally the USDA. But the way it will proceed is the federal government will largely leave it to the states to regulate it. Eventually we'll get to more federal regulations, but at this time, since only maybe a little bit more than a majority of the states have passed industrial hemp legislation, the approach is to allow states to use their states' rights to implement that on their own. There's a third bill in the Senate, and it's called the Therapeutic Hemp Medical Access Act, and that is Senate Bill 1333. And that's an interesting bill. Over the past, maybe the past 5 to 10 years, what's been growing in popularity and more knowledge is being gained on different cannabinoids other than THC. They're non-psychoactive cannabinoids that also have great medical benefit, and one of those in particular is known as cannabidiol, CBD. And this is a bill to essentially allow for the growth of cannabis that is high in CBD and low in THC. And interestingly enough, it defines therapeutic hemp as less than 0.3% THC. So if that were to pass and the Industrial Hemp Farming Act were not, it would have the same effect in legalizing at the federal level industrial hemp, allowing states to proceed with what we believe to be commercialization. However, we are sitting here without yet having a hearing on these bills and not quite sure whether or not they will make it to a vote in either the House or the Senate. At least in this session.
Right. Now, obviously there's different methods of legalization, different bills, different acts. What are some of the ways that our listeners could get involved in pushing these through and really supporting them, educating politicians or representatives? How can they, kind of encourage these representatives to take a look at these and to really consider them for the benefit of humanity, obviously?
Well, they ought to initially contact their federal representatives in the House and the Senate and encourage them to sign on as co-authors and co-sponsors of these bills. They can write to the legislators to help explain the benefits of these bills and encourage them that way. They can also, if they're in, actually when the representatives are in the district, they could help to get meetings with them, perhaps join with other folks to have a more powerful effect. If you're in D.C., request to see your legislators while you're there, drop in and encourage them to sign on to these bills. But in addition to all of that, one way to encourage legislators to take action is through spending dollars. And the more money that is spent by folks on commercial hemp products, that will only help to put pressure on the legislators and realize that this is, of economic benefit to help not only the economy at the federal level, but at the local and state level as well.
Exactly. And really what you're describing, I've mentioned for years, which is vote with your dollars. Wherever you invest, whatever you put your money into is going to expand, or it's going to, you're basically symbolizing where your values are by where your money goes. And so by putting your money into hemp, whether it's clothing or food or soap or, investing in Vote Hemp and, sending donations, if you go to votehemp.com, getting involved, these are all ways, as you mentioned, Patrick, that are going to increase awareness, but it's also going to show how critically essential it is to our economy to legalize industrial hemp.
That's absolutely correct, Tyler.
So what would you say? Now, there's a few ways of changing laws. One of the ways, several of the states, they have ballot initiatives where the people actually get all their signatures together and are able to change laws by signature gathering. How do ballot initiatives differ from like a House bill or a Senate bill?
Well, initiatives are done at the state level in states that allow them. Not all states allow them, but in California we have that process. There are two different levels of the process. One is making a constitutional amendment, and the other is essentially passing a new law. The real distinction between those is in form and effect. Form is you need more signatures to get a constitutional amendment, and then a constitutional amendment, it goes into the Constitution, whereas if you were passing an initiative that's not a constitutional amendment, it would go into the statute books. So that's one difference. But in the legislative process, you're working to lobby the legislators at the Capitol, and then ultimately, if you can get the bill passed through the committees in each house of the legislature, then you're lobbying the governor for his signature. It's very different when you're dealing with an initiative on the ballot. Number one, you need tremendous funding in order to get enough signatures on the ballot. You really need to hire folks to go gather signatures. The numbers are on the low end on the constitutional amendment process. It's 500,000 to 600,000 signatures, as I recall, and more like 800,000 to 1 million on the constitutional amendment side. That's a lot of signatures, and you can't just rely on each signature to be 100% accurate and in full effect. So you have to go over that by accounting for non-legitimate signatures.
Right.
Subsequently,
so in other words,
go ahead.
Doubling how many signatures you need to get for that chance that the person just signed it because they wanted to get you out of their face or whatever.
That's correct. Or they're not registered at the address or even in the county that they said they were. And then after that, the money is really required to run the campaign. It's largely a TV ad campaign, somewhat old school, but and the amount of money that is going to be needed to pass an initiative and the campaign and the advertising dollars really depends on who the opposition is and how much money they're going to put in it. If we look back at the Prop 19 initiative in, I believe it was 2010, which would have legalized recreational adult use of cannabis, the dollars that were spent on the pro side were in the neighborhood of tens of millions. I believe it was around $10 million, but the opposition, I think, spent more than that. So a tremendous amount of resources goes into passing an initiative where it's not that pricey to get a bill through the legislature.
So that seems like a more legitimate approach, is really encouraging our representatives rather than maybe putting all of our energy into signatures. Would you say going after both approaches is good, or focusing on one is more important?
Well, I think both approaches are good, but when you go to the ballot box and initiative, you want to go with a very big project and all-encompassing drafted legislation. So we anticipate that there will be Prop 19 failed in California in 2010. We anticipate an initiative in 2016 that would do something similar to what Prop 19 did. Maybe it'll be very different, but inside of it, it's going to be dealing with recreational use. It'll have probably a medical component to it, as well as an industrial hemp component to it. Mm-hmm. And another difference there is that the only way to overturn an initiative is by a subsequent initiative, or unless the courts say that there's some aspect of it that is unconstitutional. But when you pass legislation within the either Congress or the state legislature, that could be overturned by going back and passing subsequent legislation. So that's a very significant difference.
Right. So I would love to hear your perspective, or just what I know we've pretty much gone over it. You know, these bills that need to be passed, the Senate bill, the HR bill. What are a few, or who are a few representatives or leaders that are currently out there in support of industrial hemp, whether it's state representatives or agricultural commissioners? Who are some of the people out there that you would recommend people contact or commend or look to for, advice, or look to for kind of as an example of how they're leading the way to bring hemp to the people?
Well, in California, it's Senator Mark Leno's been our champion. In Kentucky has done a great job of leading the way. And in Kentucky, you have the current Secretary of Department of Agriculture, Comer, Comer. Mm-hmm. And I believe he was running for governor. I don't think he prevailed in the primary election, and he may be announcing running for the House. He has been a champion, and I would say that he is one of the folks that are most instrumental for getting the hemp amendment into the Farm Bill. And along with that, you have Rand Paul. Ironically enough, we may disagree on lots of different areas of their positions, but Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell have also been instrumental in both getting the hemp amendment to the Farm Bill passed, and the language friendly to the industry, as well as pushing bills that are currently in Congress. Patrick Leahy, who I believe is out of Vermont, has been very helpful at the Senate level, as has been Ron Wyden from Oregon. And then I believe in Kentucky, I believe it's House member Markley. He's either Oregon or Kentucky, but it's been those states that have really helped to lead the way. Both House members from Oregon, and I believe a member or two from the Senate, as well as Kentucky. They've been the states that have been really leading the way at the national level.
Right.
As well as Colorado, and I believe the member there is House Representative Polis.
Okay, great. Well, these are wonderful names. If you missed any of them, just rewind this episode and contact these representatives. Let them know that you're thankful for leading the way and doing what's necessary to make these changes. We just have about 5 minutes left. I'm so thankful for you joining us today, Patrick. What if you could offer our listeners one thing that they could do today that maybe doesn't cost any money, that will contribute? And I know we've already mentioned, purchasing hemp products, but maybe something that's free that they could do today that will help change the way people see hemp and will really make a difference. What's something you suggest our listeners could do today?
Well, that's a good question, and for me, it goes back to, I look back at my own history as an environmentalist, and as a young environmentalist, I was really thinking that we and having the goals and objectives to change the world and to have this great influence. But over the years, what I've realized is that it takes one conversation at a time to have those influences and that effect. I refer to it as ripples. And if you can go out and have a single conversation with somebody who doesn't know anything about hemp and help educate them on the differences between hemp and the so-called marijuana side of the cannabis plant, I choose to eradicate that word from my vocabulary and use the term cannabis, either recreational, medicinal, or industrial, and help to increase the knowledge amongst your neighbors, and they in turn can reach out and teach other folks about that, as well as the children. I've got a young, now he's almost a teenager, and he struggles to distinguish between hemp and the other side of cannabis. And the more we can work to properly educate the youth on these differences and the importance of understanding, that they have developing brains and that this may not be the best thing for them to engage in it at a young age, but to not look at it as the boogeyman, and that it also this plant has great benefit for humanity. Those are a few important things that folks could really help to do to shift the tide in public perception.
You heard it, folks. Spread that ripple of awareness. Like Patrick said, have conversation. Bring it up with your grandmother, with your father, with your brother, with your coworkers. Just start talking about industrial hemp and cannabis. And like Patrick said, I'm on that same page of eradicating the word marijuana, only because it's looked at as such an evil word. It's been so associated with the demonization of this plant. Through Harry Anslinger and William Randolph Hearst and all these guys back in the day that spread the propaganda. So it is crucial to make the distinction between for industrial purposes and medical or recreational cannabis. Patrick, it's been such an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. I hopefully have you on a future episode, and thank you so much for doing all your work. Where can our listeners get a hold of you if they do have any cannabis or hemp-related legal issues? How can they hire you or get a hold of you and connect with you?
Well, as you indicated, my website is patrickdgoggin.com. It's in the midst of needing some updating, but they can also reach me at patrick@votehemp.com. That'll get into my email server, and I'll be able to reach back out to you. It's been a great time being here, Tyler. I really appreciate being on the show, and I look forward to future dialogue and progress.
Right on. Well, have a wonderful day, listeners. We appreciate you tuning in. Check us out on the iTunes podcast library. Just type in HempAware, all one word. Increase your knowledge every day. Go to HempAware.com/books to get the latest and the most classic books on hemp and industrial hemp cannabis. And give us a ring, 805-410-4367. We'd love to hear your opinions, your perspectives. What is it that you want to learn about hemp? Who do you want to have on the show? Thanks so much for tuning in. This is your Hempy host, Tyler Hemp. Thanks again, Patrick.
Thank you, Tyler.
Blessings.